Deep in the heart of the Hell Creek Formation, 66 million years ago, the air is a suffocating blanket of humid heat and the scent of rotting ferns. The landscape is a labyrinth of winding rivers and dense subtropical forests, a world where every rustle in the undergrowth could signal the end of a life. Here, the Tyrannosaurus rex reigns supreme. We often imagine the T-Rex as an unstoppable monster, a cinematic villain that fears nothing. Standing nearly 13 feet tall at the hip and weighing as much as an African elephant, it is a marvel of predatory evolution. Its skull is built to withstand the massive stresses of its own bite, a force of 12,000 pounds per square inch, enough to turn a Cadillac into scrap metal. But as the King of Dinosaurs rounds a bend in a dried riverbed, it stops. Its binocular vision, sharper than a hawk's, locks on to a shape that doesn't flee. It doesn't scream. It doesn't stampede. Emerging from the shadows is a creature that looks less like an animal and more like a mountain of bone and jagged stone. This is the Ankylosaurus. This is the ultimate standoff of the Cretaceous period. The T-Rex is a specialist in destruction, but the Ankylosaurus is a specialist in survival. Unlike the hadrosaurs that rely on speed or the triceratops that relies on a head-on charge, the Ankylosaurus offers no easy target. It is wide, low to the ground, and draped in an impenetrable suit of armor. To the T-Rex, this isn't just a meal, it is a high-stakes puzzle. In this moment, the predator's stomach growls, but its instinct screams a warning. It circles, its massive bird-like feet thudding softly on the soft earth. The Ankylosaurus shifts its weight, its small dark eye tracking the giant. It doesn't need to outrun the king, it only needs to outlast him. Every step the T-Rex takes is a calculation of risk versus reward. One wrong move, one overeager lunge, and the apex predator could face a catastrophic injury that would lead to a slow, agonizing death by starvation. This tension, this biological Cold War between the greatest bite and the greatest shield, defined the final days of the dinosaurs. As we begin this journey, we step into the tracks of these two titans to see what happens when the most dangerous mouth in history meets the most dangerous tail. The king is hungry, but the fortress is ready. To understand why the King of Dinosaurs hesitated, we must look at the biological engineering that made Ankylosaurus magniventris a walking fortress. Imagine a creature that has traded every ounce of speed for absolute impenetrable defense. Measuring nearly 30 feet long and weighing up to 8 tons, the Ankylosaurus was a low-slung powerhouse, its belly nearly scraping the ferns of the Cretaceous marshes. But its most striking feature, the reason it survived in a world of giants, was its armor. This wasn't just thick skin. The Ankylosaurus was draped in a mosaic of bone called osteoderms. These were plates of bone grown directly within the skin, similar to the armor of a modern crocodile, but far more sophisticated. These plates weren't uniform. They were a complex topographical map of protection. Large oval plates covered the back and neck, while smaller pea-sized bony studs filled the gaps between them, ensuring there was no chink in the armor. Recent histological studies reveal that these plates were reinforced with a crisscrossing network of collagen fibers, much like the rebar in high-strength concrete. This made the armor incredibly lightweight for its strength, capable of absorbing the massive impact of a T-Rex's bite without shattering. The protection didn't stop at the torso. The Ankylosaurus featured a skull that was essentially a solid block of bone. Even its eyelids had evolved into bony shutters. When a predator approached, the Ankylosaurus didn't run, it hunkered down. By tucking its legs beneath its armored skirt and pressing its soft, vulnerable underbelly to the earth, it transformed into an immovable dome. To a T-Rex, this was a nightmare. The king was used to crushing windpipes or snapping spines, but there was no neck to grab here. The Ankylosaurus's neck was short, thick, and shielded by heavy bony rings. Every potential kill zone was locked behind a wall of bone. Evolution had crafted a creature that defied the very logic of the food chain. It was a masterpiece of passive resistance, a biological no trespassing sign written in bone and keratin. For the T-Rex, attacking an Ankylosaurus was like trying to eat a boulder. Only this boulder had a mind of its own, and as we are about to see, it was hiding a devastating secret beneath its tail. If the armor was the shield, the tail was the sword, and it was a weapon of absolute bone-crushing devastation. To understand the gravity of this threat, we have to look at the tail of the Ankylosaurus not as a limb, but as a sophisticated piece of biological siege weaponry. Most dinosaur tails were flexible, used for balance or swimming, but the Ankylosaurus underwent a radical evolutionary transformation. The last half of its tail was fused together by ossified tendons, turning the vertebrae into a rigid, unbreakable handle. At the very end of this handle sat the club, two massive lateral nodules of bone, sometimes measuring over 2 feet wide. Imagine the physics at play. When a Tyrannosaurus rex lunged, the Ankylosaurus didn't just sit there. It pivoted its low, heavy body with surprising agility, swinging that tail in a wide horizontal arc. Because the base of the tail was thick with massive muscle attachments, the club could be swung with incredible velocity. Forensic engineering models suggest that a full-force strike from an adult Ankylosaurus club delivered enough kinetic energy to shatter a T-Rex's shin bone instantly. For a 7-ton predator like the T-Rex, a broken leg was not just an injury, it was a death sentence. It couldn't chase, it couldn't ambush, and it certainly couldn't support its own weight to eat. One well-placed swing from the Ankylosaurus could end the king's reign in a single second. The club was positioned at the perfect height to strike the T-Rex exactly where it was most vulnerable, the ankles and the knees. There is a chilling efficiency to this design. The club wasn't just a blunt instrument, it was shaped to concentrate force. Some specimens showed the club had a flattened, sharp-edged profile, acting less like a mallet and more like a heavy axe. This was the ultimate deterrent. The T-Rex possessed the most powerful bite in terrestrial history, but the Ankylosaurus possessed a countermeasure that could literally take the king off his feet. It was a game of high-stakes chicken. The T-Rex had to get close enough to find a gap in the armor, but every inch closer brought it into the kill zone of that swinging sledgehammer. This wasn't just defense, it was a promise of mutual destruction. The Ankylosaurus didn't need to kill the T-Rex to win, it only had to break it. In the cold, calculating world of the late Cretaceous, every predator was a high-stakes gambler, and the Tyrannosaurus rex was the most successful player in the game. But even the king knew when to fold. To understand why a T-Rex would often turn its back on a meal as massive as an Ankylosaurus, we have to look at the brutal reality of prehistoric survival, the cost-benefit analysis. Paleontology isn't just about bones, it's about the stories those bones tell of lives lived in constant peril. When we examine the fossilized remains of T-Rex, we often find a map of pain. We see ribs that were broken and healed, tail vertebrae crushed by the jaws of rivals, and even evidence of massive infections. These predators were tough, but they were not immortal. For a T-Rex, a hunt wasn't just about getting dinner, it was a risk to its entire future. A T-Rex that suffered a shattered shin from an Ankylosaurus club couldn't simply go to a hospital. It couldn't limp after a herd of Triceratops. A broken leg for a 7-ton bipedal predator was a slow-motion death sentence by starvation. Evidence from the fossil record suggests the T-Rex was highly selective. When we look at feeding traces, the tooth marks left on prey, we see a clear pattern. The bones of hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, are covered in T-Rex bite marks. They were the easy calories, fast but defenseless once caught. Triceratops bones also show frequent signs of battle, suggesting the T-Rex was willing to risk a horn to the chest for such a massive prize. But the Ankylosaurus? Its remains are rarely found with T-Rex tooth marks. This tells us something profound about the T-Rex's intelligence. It wasn't a mindless killing machine. It was an apex strategist with an enlarged brain capable of complex sensory processing. The T-Rex could likely perceive the threat zone of that swinging club. It saw the low-slung armored dome and realized there was no neck to bite, no soft flank to rip open, and a high probability of a career-ending injury. The Ankylosaurus was the poison pill of the ecosystem. It was a meal that could kill you back. In the silent standoff between the king's hunger and the tank's defiance, the king often chose to walk away. It wasn't cowardice, it was the very reason that T-Rex remained at the top of the food chain for millions of years. The story of the Ankylosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus rex did not end with a final cinematic battle, but with a sudden celestial silence. 66 million years ago, a mountain of rock from space slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula, bringing the age of the Titans to a fiery close. But as the dust settled over the millennia, the legacy of the living tank began to emerge from the stone, teaching us a profound lesson about the nature of life on Earth. When paleontologists first unearthed the massive fused skull and the heavy tail club of Ankylosaurus, they didn't just find a dinosaur, they found the ultimate expression of defensive evolution. This creature was the endpoint of a lineage that had spent over 100 million years perfecting the art of not being eaten. It wasn't built for the arms race of speed. It was built to end the race entirely. In the modern world, we see its echoes everywhere. From the armored hide of a crocodile to the impenetrable shell of a tortoise or the thick, scaly skin of a rhinoceros, nature continues to use the Ankylosaurus blueprint. If you cannot run, you must become unbreakable. The Ankylosaurus remains a symbol of defiance. In a world dominated by the most terrifying predator to ever walk the land, it stood its ground. It proved that power isn't always about the sharpest teeth or the loudest roar. Sometimes power is the ability to say no to the king. The legacy of this armored giant lives on in every military tank designed for the battlefield and every piece of heavy machinery built to withstand extreme force. It is the gold standard for structural integrity in biology. As we look back at the Hell Creek Formation today, we don't just see a graveyard of monsters. We see a balanced masterpiece of ecology. The T-Rex pushed the Ankylosaurus to become an impenetrable fortress, and the Ankylosaurus pushed the T-Rex to become a smarter, more calculated hunter. They were two sides of the same evolutionary coin, bound together in a dance of predator and prey that lasted till the very end of the Mesozoic era. The Ankylosaurus may not have been the king of the world, but it was the only one that could make the king look the other way. A silent, stony testament to the fact that even the greatest tyrants have a limit they cannot cross.